Quick correction for yesterday's video. Go ahead and skip to this time code if you do not care. I made a pretty big mistake by saying one character's death, that I won't spoil who it is, was exactly the same as it was in the book. No, it was not. I was under the impression of that because I read something on Twitter, and then also I read the book that House of the Dragon was based off of during a time where I was trying to read 3 or 4 books at once to get as many book reviews out as possible, back when the channel was a lot more just book reviews. And if you want an answer on why I don't do that anymore and why you get less book reviews, it's because that is not a good way to read and review books. It's why I don't like a lot of my older videos. You retain so little when you try and just speed read so many different worlds and stories at once, and there's no real good excuse beyond that. It was a dumb habit to be in, and I'm sorry. I did edit it out of the video, not because I'm trying to hide a mistake, because I don't want other people who haven't read the book to be in that impression of that happening after watching my review. So yes, addressing it right here, made that mistake. It was stupid. I'm really sorry. I also misidentified the gender of Emma Darcy, which is embarrassing. I really am sorry for that as well. It's part of the problem of me just trying to crank up the number of videos you guys are getting recently, and I'm not doing the proper amount of research in the process, and it's my bad. Hope you stick by and just get, I'm an idiot, and I've never tried to hide that. I'm the doofus who's just talking about fantasy with you the best he can. Never tried to be the New York Times, and I never will. But that being said, let's get into my review of episode 5 of The Rings of Power, which, straight up, this is probably going to be a controversial one too. I'm late to the party here, so there's already 1,000 reviews of people going through beat by beat of what's working for this episode and what's not. Overall, I thought it was probably the second weakest episode of Rings of Power so far. I've seen people completely disagree. As always, I'm jealous of people who enjoy stuff more than me. That's awesome. But what I really want to talk about here is fundamentally, foundationally, why I think Rings of Power is not working for me. Everyone knows at this point, they're essentially just going off of like glossary information for a ton of the story they're telling in this show. They don't have rights for any of the major books for the Lord of the Rings franchise, and they're trying to paint a tapestry with a super limited palette. As a result, they're trying to hit this middle ground where they are true-ish to the source material as much as they can be when trying to shift the stuff they're pulling from into a season of television, while taking some creative liberties to fill in the gaps to make it a TV show. And that incessant middle ground is just vanilla ice cream, because it can't take any risks. It can't add a certain level of depth of character without Tolkien fans getting upset. Everyone just has to embody what they are on face value in Tolkien's limited text about this time. If they started pumping in a bunch more interesting creative stuff, they would make the Tolkien fans who are already crapping the bed even more upset. Then, if they took it too far in the other way and were uber loyal, it wouldn't make compelling television because the medium is just not adjusted for that. And so what we're left with is this half measure of both approaches, and maybe controversial thing, but we've seen enough of it for me to say, at this point, I wish they had just gone completely in the we're making something pretty new here territory. I wish they had been more disloyal to Tolkien's source material so they could make something a bit more compelling. And that's why every character in Rings of Power so far, I can essentially accurately summarize who they are, what their motivations are, and why they've done what they've done in a couple paragraphs. Where House of the Dragon, which yes, is premiering at the same time with a similar size cast of characters, I would have to write pages and pages on most of the foundational characters to do justice for all their different motivations, turns, and shifts, and they've had a similar number of episodes. So I think making the people who like the show mad, a bit upset, and the people who really wanted to be more loyal to Tolkien's lore upset, they should have, in my opinion, just gone more balls to the wall and done something completely their own thing and just said in their marketing up front, this is not going to be a loyal Tolkien story. We are using it for inspiration and springboarding off from there. And they would have had more freedom that way to not violate rights for stories they don't have if they did just go in a bit bold of a different direction. And as I've said before, I don't think an immature studio would have the guts to do that. So it's almost like, in hindsight, so crystal clear how this show kind of has ended up being what it's being, which, if you love it, I get it. It's a spectacle, and I think on every technical level, as we've covered here, it's really enjoyable to watch on that just wow level. But as someone who really wants characters who are making me think about why they're doing what they're doing in between episodes and speculation endlessly, the only interesting speculation I've had is essentially coming from me knowing the established mythos around the show already and wondering where those characters are going to fall into play, rather than, okay, they're actually compelling me because of what I've been handed in the show itself. It's just, I got one of like the Great British Bake Off's best dishes ever over here with House of the Dragon in terms of quality and richness and nuance, and then Rings of Power is coming out at the same time, and it's just handing me like really good ice cream. Cool. I like that. And if this wasn't coming out at the same time, this would look better. Straight up, I agree with a lot of the people who are out there right now saying Rings of Power would probably be better received if it wasn't coming out right next to House of the Dragon, because House of the Dragon's strengths are falling in right where Rings of the Power is not having weakness, but just not having a whole lot. Now, let's get into some of the positives here for episode 5 though, because I do have a few I want to talk about, especially when it comes to, I finally feel like I'm getting a firm grasp on really who some of these characters are in terms of their personality. Up into episode 5, there's just been so much happening and so many plot lines trying to get their screen time that I haven't had a firm understanding of who the various cast and crew are really going to be to each other. Now, things like Elrond and Durin's relationship, totally get it, really enjoying it, also really enjoying the Dwarven Princess. I like how Disa's hand kind of helped get them to where they are, and that's actually like the shining point of the show for me. The whole Dwarven Elrond line, despite being very predictable overall, there was just a level of spectacle to it, and the smaller details, gold flecks and fingers, things like that, are keeping me definitely engaged. The weakest, still the Harfoot. It's getting to a point where the Stranger, I'm just glad he's not Gandalf, and that's like the only thing I think during all their supposed action scenes. There was even one beat where the Harfoots are running from these dog-like creatures attacking them, and the way it was edited, it felt like there was going to be a comedic beat where they ran by, and then you were going to see like a puppy coming after them or something, but then it was like, oh no, they are these scary monsters. And yeah, there's just still something to the editing of this show that's not vibing with me. And then when it comes to the Southerners, they're doing this mob thing yet again, where in episode 4, they genuinely had someone being like, elves will take our jobs, when there's one guy trying to get a job here from the outside lands who's not an elf. And now they have this mob that's so easily swayed two different ways. One inspirational speech takes half, another inspirational speech, or not inspirational speech, dour speech, takes the other half, and they split. And then we end up in the bad guy camp, and what's supposed to feel like this really intense scene where people are hurting each other doesn't have an emotional impact because I don't know these characters. And so it's like the elf prison camp issue where you introduce these people, they die, I don't know anything about them, so I don't feel anything aside from just like, yeah, that's awful. Sad. I also find the emotional narrative of Rings of Power overall to be so straightforward, it becomes a bit disinteresting, where there's just moments where it's like, here you feel threat, in this scene you feel joy, in this scene you feel conflicted, and there's not enough for me to really start feeling like, oh, there's a complex underlying human, I know some characters aren't human, but like human depth of emotion. And fortunately though, I am coming a bit around on Galadriel as a whole. I know there's going to be some people who have issues with the choreography of the fight scene that happens in the show, because unless everything is perfect and people are really swinging metal swords at people's faces, there's someone who pulls it apart online. I think it was fun, it was whimsical, I had fun watching it, and it was also a good display of, yes, this is Galadriel, and she can mess up anyone she wants to here. And Isildur, another point where I'm like, yeah, I like that he's shown as this pompous kid who, even as we're getting this moment where you're like, yes, he's on the ship and he's being made to do a bad job, he's still on that ship because of just privilege and being handed things. And it's like, you're being set up to be the Isildur, we know. But that's counterbalanced by things like an attempt at a Harfoot musical number at the beginning, which just fell completely flat. And what feels like the show writing in dialogue that is just so not on a level you would expect for the most expensive show ever, as you keep hearing again and again and again. That yeah, I'm just feeling like a soft 6 at this point. I'm really hoping these last few episodes can bring things together and put some oomph in there, and we'll just look at a shaky foundation of which a lot was built off of. But one thing I've certainly learned in life, it's never to trust a shaky foundation. So I will be more excited for season 2, hoping that, like many shows do, think people look at what went right and wrong in season 1 and correct course, and season 2 is brilliant. That has happened time and time again, even with one of my favorite shows of all time. But let me know, please, what are your thoughts? This is just my dumb, subjective take, and I would love to hear your alls in the comments down below. Like and subscribe if you have not already. Hit the Patreon if you want to support what I do here. I got books, I got merch. Have a good one, y'all. Peace.